Handcuffs bit into his wrists, drawing blood as he was slammed face first against the cold asphalt. Officers Riker and Hayes laughed, relishing the moment they took down another suspect in their territory. They were arrogant, brutal, and completely oblivious to the truth. Little did they realize, the man they were manhandling, pinning to the ground in the pouring rain, wasn't just a random stranger. He was Marcus Vance, and by morning, he would be their new chief of police. The rain in Oak Ridge fell in relentless, heavy sheets, drumming a steady, rhythmic beat against the roof of Marcus Vance's understated charcoal SUV. The digital clock on the dashboard glowed a faint blue. 11:42 p.m. Sunday night. In exactly 8 hours and 18 minutes, Marcus was scheduled to stand in the atrium of the Oak Ridge Municipal Building, raise his right hand, and swear an oath to protect and serve a town that had recently become a national flashpoint for police brutality and systemic corruption. Oak Ridge, a sprawling, rust-belt suburb with a population hovering around 90,000, was a powder keg. For decades, the Oak Ridge Police Department had operated like an autonomous fiefdom, a good old boys club insulated from consequences. The previous chief, Arthur Sterling, had been forced into an unceremonious early retirement after a federal probe uncovered rampant civil rights violations, evidence tampering, and a culture of toxic racial profiling. The mayor, Elias Thorne, a desperate politician trying to salvage his city's burning reputation, had spent 6 months searching the country for an outsider. He needed a fixer. He found Marcus Vance. Marcus was a 22-year veteran of the Chicago Police Department's Internal Affairs Division, a man whose reputation for uncompromising integrity had earned him as many enemies in blue as it had commendations. At 47, Marcus was built like a retired middleweight boxer, broad-shouldered, lean, with sharp, perceptive eyes that missed absolutely nothing. He wore his hair closely cropped, his jaw dusted with a neatly trimmed beard, heavily salted with grey. Tonight, Marcus wasn't dressed in the crisp, gold-braided uniform of a chief of police. That uniform was carefully pressed and hanging in the garment bag resting on his back seat. Instead, Marcus wore his standard, off-duty but on-call attire: dark navy tactical trousers, polished black boots, a crisp white button-down shirt, devoid of any brass or insignia, and a heavy, unbranded black tactical sweater to ward off the biting November chill. He looked like law enforcement, but without the badges. He also looked like private security, or to the untrained, prejudiced eye, someone wearing tactical gear for nefarious reasons. Marcus turned the steering wheel, guiding his SUV off the main arterial road and down the narrow, dimly lit alleyway that led to the rear of the Oak Ridge 4th Precinct. He had driven 300 miles that day, leaving his wife, Sarah, back in Chicago to pack up the rest of their home. "You're walking into a hornet's nest, Mark," she had warned him, standing in the doorway with a mug of coffee. "They don't want you there. The union hates you before you've even stepped foot in the building." Marcus had simply kissed her forehead. "That's exactly why I need to go." The precinct's rear parking lot was surrounded by a high chain-link fence topped with concertina wire. The motorized gate was notoriously faulty, a detail Marcus had read in the departmental audit reports, and sure enough, it was stuck half open, wide enough for a vehicle to slip through. Marcus frowned, a glaring security vulnerability on his very first unofficial inspection. He drove through the gap, his tires splashing through deep puddles, and surveyed the lot. A dozen black and white cruisers sat idle, slick with rain. Several personal vehicles, mostly oversized pickup trucks and dark sedans, filled the outer perimeter. And right near the back entrance of the station, flanked by a pristine white curb, was a spot explicitly stenciled with the words, "Chief of Police." reserved 24/7. The spot was empty. Marcus pulled his SUV smoothly into the space, shifting the vehicle into park and killing the engine. He let out a long, slow exhale. He hadn't planned on making a grand entrance tonight. He simply wanted to see the precinct in its natural, unfiltered state. The graveyard shift on a Sunday night was when a police department was at its most honest. The brass were asleep in their suburban homes. The public relations officers were off the clock, and the true culture of the precinct thrived under the harsh fluorescent lights. Marcus wanted to walk in, grab a cup of the notoriously awful break-room coffee, observe the desk sergeant, and feel the pulse of the building he was about to command. He reached into the passenger seat, grabbed his heavy leather duffel bag, which contained his duty weapon secured in a lockbox, his credentials, his new badge, and his administrative paperwork, and slung it over his shoulder. He grabbed a simple black umbrella, popped the door open, and stepped out into the freezing rain. The back lot was deathly quiet, save for the hum of the precinct's massive HVAC units. Marcus popped open his umbrella, the rain drumming violently against the nylon fabric, and began walking toward the reinforced steel door of the rear entrance. He didn't make it more than 20 paces before the harsh, blinding beam of a high-intensity police spotlight hit him dead in the face. "Hey, you! Freeze right there and keep your hands where I can see them!" The voice was aggressive, sharp, and laced with an unmistakable adrenaline-fueled arrogance. It boomed from the PA system of a patrol cruiser that had just pulled into the lot behind him, its tires screeching slightly on the wet asphalt. Marcus stopped in his tracks. He didn't flinch. He didn't panic. 2 decades in Chicago had trained him to remain perfectly composed under sudden pressure. He slowly lowered his umbrella slightly to shield his eyes from the blinding glare of the spotlight, keeping his right hand clearly visible on the handle and his left hand loosely gripping the strap of his duffel bag. 2 doors of the cruiser slammed shut in rapid succession. Footsteps splashed heavily through the puddles, approaching fast. "I said drop the bag and get your hands up. Now!" a second voice barked. Marcus squinted through the rain. He could make out the silhouettes of 2 officers moving tactically, fanning out to his left and right. One had his hand resting ominously on the butt of his holstered sidearm. The other had already unclipped his taser. Marcus recognized their type immediately. Every department had them. The cowboys. The adrenaline junkies who treated the badge not as a shield for the public, but as a license to dominate. "Good evening, officers," Marcus said, his voice calm, resonant, and deliberately measured. It was a voice used to commanding rooms, a voice that did not waver. "It's raining pretty hard. Let's not escalate this. I'm just heading inside the precinct." "Shut your mouth," the officer on the left snapped, stepping into the periphery of the light. His nameplate caught a fraction of the glare. Riker. Officer Thomas Riker was in his late 20s, built like a fire hydrant, with a tight buzz cut and a jaw perpetually set in a belligerent sneer. "You don't tell us what to do. Drop the umbrella. Drop the bag. Kick them away." The second officer, Hayes, was taller, lankier, and looked nervously eager to impress his partner. "You deaf, buddy? Do it." Marcus analyzed the situation in a fraction of a second. He could simply state who he was. "I am Marcus Vance, your new chief of police." Stand down. That would end the encounter immediately. It would result in stammered apologies, pale faces, and immediate subservience. But as Marcus stared at Officer Riker's aggressive posture, a cold realization washed over him. If this is how they treat me, a calm, compliant man in the precinct parking lot, how do they treat the kids on the south side of Oak Ridge? How do they treat a terrified motorist during a midnight traffic stop? This was the culture he was hired to destroy. And suddenly, Marcus didn't want to play his trump card just yet. He needed to see exactly how deep the rot went. He needed to experience the disease firsthand to know how to cure it. "Officers," Marcus said, keeping his tone perfectly neutral. He gently placed the umbrella on the ground and let the heavy leather duffel bag slide off his shoulder, landing with a wet thud on the asphalt. He raised his hands slowly, palms open and empty, to shoulder height. "My hands are up. I am unarmed. I am parked in the lot to conduct some business inside," Riker scoffed, closing the distance quickly. "Business? At midnight? In a restricted lot?" Riker's eyes darted toward the charcoal SUV. "And you parked in the chief's spot. You got some nerve, pal. What are you doing back here? Trying to break into the cruisers?" "No," Marcus replied evenly. "I parked there because the spot was empty. And as I said, I have business inside." "Turn around! Face away from me!" Riker yelled, drawing his taser and pointing it squarely at Marcus's chest. The twin red laser dots danced over the fabric of Marcus's black sweater. "There is no need for weapons, Officer Riker," Marcus said, purposefully reading the man's nameplate. "I am complying with your orders. I am not a threat." "I didn't ask for your opinion. And how the hell do you know my name?" Riker spat, clearly agitated by Marcus's utter lack of fear. Suspects were supposed to cower. They were supposed to stutter. This man's icy composure was infuriating Riker. "Turn around!" Marcus slowly pivoted on his heel, turning his back to the officers. He kept his hands raised, the rain soaked through his hair, running down the back of his neck. "Hands behind your head. Interlace your fingers," Hayes ordered, stepping up behind him. Marcus did so. Before his fingers were even fully interlaced, Riker lunged forward. The officer didn't just pat him down. He grabbed the collar of Marcus's heavy sweater and violently shoved him forward. Marcus, caught off guard by the sheer unnecessary force of the assault, stumbled, his chest slamming hard against the wet, freezing hood of the nearby patrol cruiser. Pain flared in his ribs, but Marcus bit his tongue, refusing to give them the satisfaction of a grunt. "Spread your legs," Riker shouted, kicking Marcus's right ankle violently outward. "Officer, this level of force is completely unwarranted," Marcus said, his voice dropping an octave, a dangerous edge bleeding into his calm demeanor. "I am fully compliant. You are violating protocol." "Listen to this guy, Mitch." Riker laughed darkly, leaning his heavy forearm into the back of Marcus's neck, pressing his face into the slick metal of the hood. "We got a regular street lawyer here. Thinks he knows protocol. Probably one of those sovereign citizen nut jobs," Hayes chimed in, roughly patting down Marcus's legs and waist, checking for weapons. "He's got nothing on his waist, Tommy. Wait, what's this?" Hayes reached into the cargo pocket of Marcus's tactical trousers. He pulled out a heavy metal ring, holding several keys. "Keys." Probably a jimmy in his bag, Riker deduced instantly, fabricating a narrative out of thin air. "All right, tough guy. You're trespassing in a restricted law enforcement area. You're demonstrating suspicious behavior. Bring your arms down behind your back." Marcus didn't move immediately. "Officer Riker, I strongly advise you to check the ID in my wallet before you take this any further. It's in my right back pocket, and the documents in that duffel bag will clarify exactly who I am." "I'll check your ID when you're in a cage, pal," Riker hissed. He grabbed Marcus's left wrist, wrenching it down painfully. "Resisting! Stop resisting!" "I am not resisting," Marcus said clearly and loudly, ensuring his voice would be picked up by the cruiser's dashcam microphones, assuming they were even turned on. He let his arms go limp, offering zero resistance, as Riker yanked his right arm back to meet his left. Click, click, click. The icy steel of the Smith & Wesson handcuffs locked around Marcus Vance's wrists. Riker squeezed the cuffs tight, punishingly tight, the metal bit immediately into the skin over Marcus's carpal bones, sending a sharp, electrical pain shooting up his forearms. It was a classic, petty cop trick. Cuff them just tight enough to cause localized nerve pain without leaving immediate massive bruising. Tight enough for you, slick, Riker whispered in his ear, pulling up on the chain between the cuffs, just enough to hyperextend Marcus's shoulders. Marcus closed his eyes, inhaling the smell of rain, motor oil, and the sour sweat of the officer behind him. He felt a profound, heavy sorrow, mixed with a simmering, righteous rage. Mayor Thorne had warned him the department was bad. Marcus was currently experiencing just how bad. "They are adequately secured, officer," Marcus replied, his voice devoid of any pain or submission. Riker shoved him off the hood. "Let's take a walk inside. Grab his bag, Mitch. Let's see what this clown was trying to pull." The transition from the freezing, chaotic rain into the stifling, fluorescent-lit bowels of the Oak Ridge 4th Precinct was jarring. The air inside smelled of stale bleach, cheap burnt coffee, and the lingering, metallic tang of nervous sweat. It was the universal scent of every police booking area in the country, a smell Marcus knew intimately. Riker walked behind Marcus, keeping a harsh grip on his bicep, practically frog-marching him down the narrow cinder-block hallway. Hayes trailed behind, carrying Marcus's heavy leather duffel bag. "Keep moving," Riker barked, giving Marcus an unnecessary shove between the shoulder blades as they passed the holding cells. The bullpen of the precinct was a depressing sight. Desks were cluttered with mountains of disorganized paperwork, half-eaten takeout containers, and outdated computer monitors. Several officers were lounging in swivel chairs, chatting loudly, completely ignoring the radio chatter echoing from the dispatch console. The discipline in the room was non-existent. As Riker paraded his handcuffed prisoner through the room, a few officers looked up, smirking. "What did you catch, Tommy?" called out a heavy-set officer, missing his tie, leaning back with his boots resting on his desk. "Found him skulking around the back lot, lurking in the chief's parking spot," Riker called back loudly, playing to his audience. "Wearing tactical gear, probably looking to break into the armory or vandalize the cruisers. Refused to identify himself." Marcus registered the lie instantly. Refused to identify himself. A deliberate falsification of the arrest narrative, spoken loudly in front of witnesses to establish the official story. It was textbook corruption. "Look at him," another officer chuckled, walking over to get a closer look at Marcus. "Thinks he's a Navy SEAL with that sweater. You lost, buddy? The airsoft range is 2 towns over." Marcus remained silent. He kept his posture impeccably straight, his chin parallel to the floor, his eyes scanning the room. He was mapping the faces, matching them to the personnel files he had spent the last month memorizing. The heavy-set officer was Officer Kowalski. 3 excessive force complaints in 2 years, all conveniently dismissed by the previous chief. The one mocking his sweater was Officer Jenkins, currently under a quiet internal review for falsifying overtime logs. They were a pack of wolves, comfortable and fat in their den, entirely unaware that the apex predator had just been dragged into their midst. "Sergeant Miller!" Riker shouted toward a raised desk at the back of the room. A balding man in his late 50s, looking exhausted and visibly irritated, looked up from a crossword puzzle. Sergeant Miller was the shift commander. He wore the stripes on his sleeve, but it was clear from his slumped posture that he commanded 0 actual respect or authority in this room. He was riding out a desk job until his pension kicked in. "What is it, Riker?" Miller sighed, adjusting his reading glasses. "Got a trespasser. Uncooperative. Need an interrogation room to process him. We're gonna inventory his bag." Miller barely glanced at Marcus. He didn't ask for the probable cause. He didn't ask if the suspect had been read his Miranda rights. He didn't notice the handcuffs were biting into Marcus's wrists so tightly that his hands were beginning to swell and turn a faint shade of purple. The total breakdown of supervisory oversight was staggering. "Room 2 is open," Miller grumbled, waving a dismissive hand before returning to his crossword. "Don't make a mess, Tommy. Janitorial doesn't come until Tuesday." "Copy that, Sarge." Riker smirked. He yanked Marcus's arm. "Let's go, Commando." Interrogation Room 2 was a claustrophobic box. Pale green walls peeling at the corners, a battered aluminum table bolted to the floor, and 3 plastic chairs. A large two-way mirror dominated the right wall, though Marcus knew from his files that the recording equipment in this precinct had mysteriously broken 6 months ago and had never been repaired. Riker shoved Marcus into one of the plastic chairs. "Sit." Marcus sat. The handcuffs pinned behind his back forced him to sit at an awkward, uncomfortable angle, his shoulders aching. He breathed slowly through his nose, controlling his heart rate. Hayes dropped the heavy leather duffel bag onto the aluminum table with a loud thwack. "Want me to open it, Tommy?" "Yeah, dump it," Riker said, leaning against the doorframe and crossing his arms, looking at Marcus with supreme confidence. "Let's see what our little terrorist brought to the precinct. I am advising you once again," Marcus said, his voice echoing slightly in the small room, "to look at my identification. It is in my back right pocket. And if you open that bag without a warrant or my consent, anything you find is inadmissible." "Oh, he's a lawyer again," Riker laughed, pushing off the doorframe and stepping into Marcus's personal space, leaning down until their faces were inches apart. Riker's breath smelled of wintergreen gum and stale tobacco. "Listen to me very carefully, you piece of garbage. Out there, you have rights. In here, in my house, you have jack squat until I say you do. We caught you trespassing. That gives us probable cause to search your belongings incident to arrest. So you can shut your mouth, or I can help you shut it. Understand?" Marcus met Riker's aggressive stare without blinking. His eyes were like polished obsidian, cold, hard, and entirely devoid of intimidation. "I understand exactly how you operate, Officer Riker. Perfectly." Something in Marcus's tone, a chilling, absolute authority, made Riker hesitate for a fraction of a second. A tiny flicker of doubt crossed the young officer's eyes, but his ego quickly snuffed it out. "Dump the bag, Mitch," Riker barked, stepping back. Hayes unzipped the heavy leather duffel. He reached inside and grabbed the first thing his hand touched. He pulled it out and tossed it onto the aluminum table. It was a standard black steel lockbox, the kind used to transport firearms. Riker's eyes lit up. Well, well, well. Carrying a concealed lockbox on police property. We just upgraded from trespassing to a felony, boys. Riker grinned wickedly at Marcus. "Where's the key, tough guy?" "The keys you confiscated from my pocket," Marcus replied neutrally. Riker tossed the keychain to Hayes. "Open it." Hayes fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking slightly with adrenaline. He found the small brass key that fit the lockbox. He turned it. The latch popped open. Hayes lifted the lid. He stared inside for a long moment. The smug grin on his face slowly evaporated, replaced by a look of profound confusion. "What is it?" Riker demanded impatiently. "A Glock? A burner?" It's a Glock 19, Hayes said, his voice suddenly sounding very small. "But, Tommy, look at it." Riker stepped forward and looked down into the foam-lined box. Resting perfectly inside was a pristine Glock 19 sidearm. But it wasn't just any civilian weapon. Stamped clearly on the slide, inlaid with white lettering, was the seal of the Chicago Police Department, alongside the words CPD, Deputy Chief Internal Affairs, M. Vance. The room went dead silent. The only sound was the faint hum of the fluorescent lights above them. Riker stared at the gun. He blinked once, twice. He looked up at Marcus, who was sitting perfectly still, his expression unreadable. Then Riker looked back at the gun. He stole a cop's gun," Riker stammered, though his voice lacked its previous bravado. The reality of the situation was trying to break through his thick skull, but his brain was desperately fighting it off. This guy robbed a Chicago deputy chief. "Officer Hayes," Marcus said, his voice slicing through the heavy silence like a scalpel. "Look in the side pocket of the bag, the zippered one on the left." Hayes, looking completely pale, didn't wait for Riker's permission. His hands trembling, he unzipped the side pocket. He reached in and pulled out a sleek, black leather wallet. It wasn't a standard civilian bifold. It was a police credential case. Hayes flipped it open. On the left side was a solid gold, heavily detailed shield. The engraving at the top read, "Chief of Police." The engraving at the bottom read, "Oak Ridge Police Department." On the right side was a laminated photo ID card. The photo was a crisp, professional headshot of the man currently sitting handcuffed to a plastic chair. The text read, "Vance Marcus, Chief of Police. Effective Monday, November 12th. The ID card fell from Hayes's trembling fingers, fluttering down to land face up on the aluminum table next to the CPD-issued sidearm. Hayes slowly raised his head. The color had completely drained from his face, leaving him looking like a terrified ghost. He looked at Riker, whose mouth was slightly open, his eyes wide and fixed on the gold badge resting on the table. "Tommy," Hayes whispered, his voice cracking. "Tommy, oh my God." Marcus shifted slightly in his chair, the handcuffs rattling against the plastic backing. He looked back and forth between the two officers, the crushing silence stretching out into an eternity. "Now," Marcus said softly, the gentle tone of his voice more terrifying than any scream. "Are we going to take these handcuffs off, gentlemen? Or should we call the mayor down here to do it for you?" The silence inside interrogation room 2 was absolute, thick enough to choke on. The only movement was the microscopic tremor in Officer Mitch Hayes's hands as he stared at the solid gold Oak Ridge Chief of Police badge resting on the scratched aluminum table. Thomas Riker's face underwent a horrifying, slow-motion transformation. The belligerent, arrogant sneer melted away, replaced by the ashen, hollow look of a man who had just stepped off a cliff in the dark and was waiting to hit the ground. His chest heaved beneath his Kevlar vest. He swallowed hard, the sound absurdly loud in the quiet room. I, Riker stammered, the words snagging in his throat. The alpha male facade shattered entirely. "The keys, Officer Hayes," Marcus Vance said, his voice as calm and steady as a metronome. "In my left cargo pocket. Retrieve them and remove these handcuffs." Hayes moved like a rusted automaton. He shuffled forward, practically hyperventilating, and reached into Marcus's pocket with trembling fingers. It took him 3 agonizing attempts to fit the small metal handcuff key into the double lock mechanism. His hands were shaking so violently that he kept missing the keyhole, scraping the metal against the steel cuffs. Click, clack, the right cuff released. Marcus brought his arm forward slowly, feeling the agonizing rush of blood returning to his hand. Click, clack. The left cuff fell away. Marcus stood up. He didn't rub his wrists, though they burned with the intensity of crushed nerve endings. He simply rolled his shoulders back, straightening his heavy black tactical sweater, towering over the 2 patrolmen. He looked down at the deep, angry red indentations ringing his wrists, a physical testament to the department's casual brutality. "Chief Vance," Riker finally choked out, his voice cracking an octave higher than normal. He held his hands up in a placating, desperate gesture. "Chief, listen. You have to understand. You were wearing tactical gear. You were in the restricted lot. It's midnight. We've had vandalism back there. We were just following standard operating procedure." Marcus turned his gaze to Riker. The look in his eyes was not angry. It was clinical. It was the look of a coroner examining a particularly gruesome cadaver. "Standard operating procedure, Officer Riker?" Marcus asked, his tone dangerously soft. "Let us review your procedure. You initiated a Terry stop without reasonable, articulable suspicion of a crime. Parking in an empty, unbarricaded lot is not a crime. You blinded me with a spotlight, unholstered a lethal weapon. Your partner's hand was on his sidearm, while you pointed a taser at my chest, against a compliant, unarmed citizen. You didn't identify yourself," Riker blurted out, a pathetic, reflexive attempt at self-preservation. "If you had just said you were the new chief—" "If I had just said I was the chief," Marcus interrupted, his voice finally rising just enough to vibrate against the peeling green walls. "If I were an ordinary black man from the south side of Oak Ridge, trying to deliver a late-night tow truck invoice, would this level of force have been acceptable? If I were a lost motorist looking for directions, would it be standard procedure to slam my face into the hood of a cruiser and hyperextend my rotator cuffs?" Riker opened his mouth, but no words came out. He looked like a fish suffocating on dry land. "You didn't ask for my identification, Riker," Marcus continued, stepping into the officer's personal space, using his physical presence to dominate the room. "You demanded I drop my belongings. You escalated to physical violence within 45 seconds of contact. You fabricated a narrative of resistance when I offered zero. You conducted an illegal search of my property incident to an unlawful arrest, completely bypassing the Fourth Amendment. You didn't even read me my Miranda rights." Marcus picked up his badge from the table. He didn't put it back in the duffel bag. He clipped it directly to his belt, the gold shield gleaming harshly under the fluorescent lights. "I am not your chief yet, Officer Riker. I am not sworn in until 8 o'clock tomorrow morning," Marcus said coldly. "Right now, I am an illegally detained citizen whose civil rights you just flagrantly violated under color of law. And as a 22-year veteran of internal affairs, I can promise you, you are looking at a Title 18, Section 242, deprivation of rights investigation, before the sun even comes up." Hayes let out a choked, terrified sob. "Chief, please. I've got a baby on the way. I was just covering my partner. I didn't touch you." "Your failure to intervene in an excessive use of force makes you complicit, Officer Hayes," Marcus stated, snapping his lockbox shut and returning it to his duffel bag. He slung the heavy bag over his shoulder. "Both of you, turn around. Face the wall." "What?" Riker whispered. "Face the wall. Hands behind your backs," Marcus commanded, his voice cracking like a whip. "You are relieved of duty, effective immediately. If you attempt to leave this room before I send a supervisor in for your weapons and badges, I will add fleeing to your list of charges. Move." Broken, terrified, and utterly defeated, Riker and Hayes turned and placed their faces against the peeling green paint, interlacing their fingers behind their heads. Marcus Vance turned his back on them, pulled open the heavy steel door of Interrogation Room 2, and walked out to face the rest of his precinct. The bullpen was exactly as Marcus had left it 10 minutes prior. Officer Kowalski was still leaning back in his chair, boots on his desk, laughing loudly at a video playing on his smartphone. Officer Jenkins was tossing a tennis ball against the cinder block wall. Sergeant Miller was hunched over his crossword, blissfully ignoring the dispatch radio, which was currently barking about a domestic disturbance on the east side. None of them noticed the heavy steel door open. None of them noticed the imposing figure walking down the narrow hallway until he was standing dead center in the room. Marcus dropped his duffel bag onto an empty desk with a resounding, heavy crash. The bullpen froze. Kowalski's boots hit the floor with a thud. Jenkins fumbled the tennis ball, letting it roll under a desk. Sergeant Miller's head snapped up, his reading glasses sliding down his nose. They looked at Marcus. Then they looked at the gleaming gold Oak Ridge Chief of Police badge clipped to his belt, Then they looked at his wrists, which were still ringed with angry purple-red bruises. "Where is Riker?" Miller asked, his voice suddenly breathless, a cold sweat breaking out across his balding forehead. The veteran sergeant was connecting the dots at lightning speed, and the picture it formed was an absolute nightmare. "Officers Riker and Hayes are currently detained in Interrogation Room 2, Marcus said, his voice carrying easily across the silent room. "They are relieved of duty pending a federal civil rights investigation and an immediate internal affairs audit." Kowalski stood up, his face flushing red. "Wait a minute. Who the hell are you? You can't just walk in here and—" "Sit down, Officer Kowalski," Marcus ordered, weaponizing the man's name. "Or I will relieve you of duty as well, and we can add insubordination to the excessive force complaints currently sitting in your file. The ones I spent all of yesterday afternoon reading." Kowalski's jaw dropped. He fell back into his chair as if he had been physically shoved. Marcus bypassed the patrol desks and walked directly up to the raised platform where Sergeant Miller sat. He stopped in front of the desk, towering over the shift commander. "Sergeant Miller," Marcus said. Yes, sir," Miller stammered, frantically pushing his crossword puzzle under a stack of incident reports. "You are the shift commander. You authorized the use of an interrogation room without verifying probable cause. You allowed an unmirandized citizen to be dragged through your bullpen in handcuffs without asking a single question about the nature of the arrest. You failed to supervise your patrolmen, and you failed to protect the integrity of this department." Miller swallowed hard, looking like he was about to vomit. "Sir, Riker said it was a routine trespasser. He said—" "I don't care what he said," Marcus cut him off, his voice dropping to a terrifying, deadly quiet. "Your job is not to take the word of an adrenaline junkie patrolman at face value. Your job is to command. You failed." Marcus turned his back on Miller and faced the bullpen. There were 12 officers currently in the room. Every single one of them was staring at him in paralyzed, unblinking silence. "My name is Marcus Vance," he announced, his voice echoing off the cinderblock walls. "In 8 hours I will officially be sworn in as your chief, but my work starts tonight." He pointed to the heavy steel doors leading to the lobby and the back lot. "Sergeant Miller, lock the doors. Nobody leaves this building. Nobody enters. Notify dispatch that the 4th Precinct is on a Code Black administrative lockdown. Only Priority 1 emergency calls are to be routed to the county sheriffs until further notice." "Sir, the Union—" Jenkins started to say, his voice trembling. "We have the right to a Union rep—" "You are not under criminal investigation yet, Officer Jenkins," Marcus snapped back, citing the legal parameters with encyclopedic precision. "This is an administrative lockdown. You will all be given your Garrity warnings before any formal statements are taken. But right now, you are going to secure your weapons in your lockers. You are going to remove your body cameras, place them on my desk, and power them down. I am seizing all digital evidence from this shift." A murmur of panic rippled through the room. Securing body cameras meant an immediate, uncompromising audit of their entire night. It was an unprecedented move. "Sir," Miller said, standing up slowly, his hands shaking. "You can't suspend the whole shift. The city—" "I am not suspending the shift," Marcus replied, turning his hard gaze back to the room. "I am quarantining a disease. For years, this department has operated under the delusion that a badge is a shield against accountability. You have falsified reports. You have harassed the citizens you are sworn to protect. You have allowed men like Thomas Riker to operate like street thugs, while you sit in here laughing and playing crossword puzzles." Marcus walked slowly down the aisle between the desks, looking each officer dead in the eye. "You thought Mayor Thorne hired a figurehead. You thought he brought in a black chief from Chicago to smile for the cameras, cut ribbons, and give you political cover so you could go back to business as usual. Marcus stopped in the center of the room. He unclipped the badge from his belt and held it up. You were wrong. I did not come here to manage you. I came here to break you down to the studs and rebuild this department from the ground up. Those of you who actually want to be police officers, who respect the law, who respect the Constitution, and who respect the people of Oak Ridge, you will survive this. The rest of you? Marcus let the badge drop to his side. The rest of you should start updating your resumes, because starting tonight, the Good Old Boys Club is dead. He turned back to Miller. Sergeant, get my gun and my lockbox out of that duffel bag. Then go into room 2, take Riker and Hayes' badges, and bring them to me. It's time to call the mayor. At 2:14 a.m., the heavy glass doors of the Oak Ridge Municipal Building's rear entrance rattled violently. Outside, silhouetted against the unforgiving downpour, stood Mayor Elias Thorne, flanked by a burly, red-faced man in a rumpled suit. Inside the 4th precinct, the atmosphere was a suffocating vacuum. The 12 patrol officers of the graveyard shift sat immobilized at their desks, completely silent, stripped of their body cameras and sidearms. Marcus Vance stood perfectly still behind the shift commander's podium, his arms crossed over his chest, his bruised wrists hidden beneath the sleeves of his tactical sweater. He nodded to Sergeant Miller. Open the door for the mayor, Sergeant. Miller scrambled over, his hands trembling as he turned the deadbolt. Mayor Thorne burst into the bullpen. He was a man accustomed to manicured press conferences, not the gritty reality of a police precinct at 2 a.m. He wore a heavy wool trench coat thrown hastily over a pair of striped pajama bottoms, his hair a disheveled mess. Right behind him was Jack Callahan, the formidable and notoriously aggressive president of the Oak Ridge Police Union. Callahan looked like a bulldog ready to bite. His jaw was clenched tight, his eyes darting around the room, taking in the unprecedented sight of a fully disarmed and quarantined shift. Marcus! Mayor Thorne gasped, shaking off his wet umbrella. What in God's name is going on here? I get a frantic call from dispatch saying the precinct is under a code black. Then Callahan calls me screaming about a hostage situation. There are no hostages, Elias, Marcus said, his voice calm, cutting through the mayor's panic. Just an overdue reckoning. Callahan shoved past the mayor, marching directly toward Marcus. He pointed a thick, accusatory finger. You listen to me, Vance. I don't care if you're the new chief or the Pope himself. You do not have the authority to unlawfully detain union members. Where are Riker and Hayes? I demand to see my men right now. You are looking at a lawsuit that will bankrupt this city. Marcus didn't flinch. He looked down at Callahan's outstretched finger with mild, clinical disgust. Officers Riker and Hayes are currently secured in holding cells 4 and 5. Their badges and weapons are locked in my duffel bag. They are suspended without pay, pending immediate termination and federal prosecution. Callahan let out a harsh, barking laugh, looking back at the bullpen to rally his troops. Federal prosecution? For what? Doing their jobs. I got the call from Miller. They stopped a suspicious, unidentified male lurking in a restricted lot wearing tactical gear. They followed procedure to the letter. It's your word against 2 decorated sworn officers, Vance. You got your feelings hurt because they didn't recognize you. That's not a crime. Mayor Thorne looked back and forth between the 2 men, sweating profusely despite the chill in the room. Marcus, please tell me you didn't overreact. If they didn't know who you were, Elias, stop talking, Marcus commanded, his tone leaving absolutely no room for debate. He turned his attention back to the union president. You think this is about my bruised ego, Mr. Callahan? You think this is a matter of he said, she said? That's exactly what it is, Callahan sneered, stepping closer, trying to use his physical bulk to intimidate Marcus. You have no witnesses, The dash cam in their cruiser was malfunctioning. The lot is a blind spot. I already checked. You got nothing, Vance. You're going to release my guys. You're going to issue a formal apology to this precinct, or I will authorize a blue flu strike by tomorrow afternoon that will leave Oak Ridge burning. Marcus reached into his pocket. He didn't pull out a badge or a gun. He pulled out his smartphone. You are correct about one thing, Mr. Callahan, Marcus said softly, tapping the screen of his phone. The precinct's cameras have conveniently been broken for months, a glaring blind spot that your officers have undoubtedly exploited for years. Marcus held the phone up. However, my vehicle, the charcoal SUV parked in the chief's spot, is equipped with a state-of-the-art, aftermarket, 360-degree sentry surveillance system. It activates upon detecting proximity motion, recording high-definition night vision video, and highly sensitive directional audio to an encrypted cloud server. The blood completely drained from Jack Callahan's face. The belligerent confidence vanished, replaced by a sudden, sickening dread. In the background, Mayor Thorne let out a long, shuddering exhale. Marcus pressed play. The audio filled the dead silence of the bullpen, crisp and horrifyingly clear. I said, drop the bag and get your hands up now. Good evening, officers. It's raining pretty hard. Let's not escalate this. I'm just heading inside the precinct. Shut your mouth. You don't tell us what to do. The recording played the entire encounter. Every thud, every scrape, it captured Marcus's absolute compliance. It captured Riker, shoving him violently against the hood of the cruiser. It captured the sickening click of the handcuffs being maliciously over-tightened, and Riker's taunting whisper, "Tight enough for you, Slick?" When the audio finished, Marcus locked his phone and slipped it back into his pocket. He looked at the Union president, whose mouth was slightly open in stunned silence. That video, Marcus said, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper, has already been emailed to the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division, the State Attorney General, and the FBI field office in Chicago. I sent it while I was sitting in your interrogation room. Callahan stepped back, putting physical distance between himself and Marcus. He looked at the floor, the fight completely knocked out of him. He knew a dead man's hand when he saw one. Riker and Hayes were finished. Elias, Marcus said, turning to the trembling mayor. Go home, get some sleep, put on a nice suit. I will see you at 8 o'clock for the swearing-in ceremony. And bring your best public relations team. You are going to need them. The morning sun broke through the heavy rain clouds just before 8 o'clock, casting a brilliant, blinding light through the towering glass walls of the Oak Ridge Municipal Building's atrium. The room was packed to absolute capacity. Every local news affiliate was present, their cameras mounted on tripods, red recording lights blinking steadily. Rumors had been bleeding out of the 4th Precinct since dawn. Whispers of a midnight raid, a locked-down shift, and arrested officers had whipped the press corps into a frenzy. Standing in the front row was Sarah Vance. She had driven through the night from Chicago the moment she received Marcus's text. She looked at her husband, standing near the podium, her eyes filled with a mixture of fierce pride and deep apprehension. Marcus Vance looked magnificent. He was dressed in the impeccable, tailored midnight blue uniform of the Oak Ridge Chief of Police. 4 gold stars gleamed sharply on his collars. The solid gold badge rested heavily over his heart. But beneath the crisp cuffs of his uniform shirt, the deep purple bruises on his wrists throbbed with a dull, constant ache. Mayor Elias Thorne stepped up to the microphone, looking pale and exhausted, forcing a politician's smile. He read through his prepared, sanitized remarks, talking about a new dawn for Oak Ridge, a commitment to transparency, and a bridge over troubled waters. It was meaningless, hollow fluff. And now, Thorne concluded, his voice tight, I present to you the new chief of the Oak Ridge Police Department, Marcus Vance." The room erupted into polite applause. Marcus stepped forward. He raised his right hand, placed his left hand on the Bible held by a local judge, and swore the oath to protect the Constitution and the citizens of Oak Ridge. When the oath was complete, Marcus stepped up to the microphone. He looked down at the prepared speech the mayor's office had drafted for him. He calmly picked up the stack of papers, folded them in half, and set them aside. A ripple of nervous energy swept through the press corps. The cameras zoomed in. "Good morning," Marcus began, his deep, resonant voice echoing through the massive atrium. He didn't smile. He looked out over the sea of reporters, city council members, and the smattering of police officers in the back of the room. "The mayor has spoken to you about transparency. Transparency is a beautiful word, but it is entirely useless without truth. And the truth is, this city is broken." A collective gasp echoed through the room. Mayor Thorne closed his eyes and pinched the bridge of his nose. "8 hours ago," Marcus continued, his voice steady and unwavering, "I arrived at the 4th precinct to begin my tenure. Before I could even enter the building, I was accosted in the parking lot. I was unarmed. I was compliant. I posed no threat. Yet, I was thrown against the hood of a patrol car, physically assaulted, and unlawfully handcuffed by 2 sworn officers of this department." Flashbulbs erupted like a strobe light. Reporters began shouting questions over one another, the atrium descending into chaos. Marcus simply raised a hand, and the sheer authority radiating from him silenced the room. "They did not know I was their new chief," Marcus said, letting the words sink in. "To them, I was just a black man in an empty lot. I was an easy target. And in that terrifying, humiliating moment, I experienced exactly what the marginalized citizens of Oak Ridge have been experiencing for over a decade. I felt the boot of a corrupted culture on my neck." He grasped the edges of the podium, leaning forward, his eyes burning with an intense, unyielding fire. "As of 6 o'clock this morning, my first official act as chief of police was to sign the termination papers for officers Thomas Riker and Mitchell Hayes. They are currently in federal custody, awaiting indictment for civil rights violations." The room exploded again, but Marcus's voice cut through the noise like thunder. "To the citizens of Oak Ridge, I am not here to ask for your immediate trust. We haven't earned it. I am here to tell you that the era of unaccountability is over. To the officers of this department who wear the badge with honor and integrity, I will stand beside you, I will fight for you, and I will lead you. But to those who believe a badge grants you the right to brutalize, to lie, and to terrorize." Marcus looked directly into the center camera lens, his face carved from granite. "Turn in your shields today, because if I catch you, I will not just fire you. I will dismantle you. I will strip you of your pension. I will arrest you, and I will ensure you never walk free in this city again. We are the police. We answer to the law, and the law is coming for its own." Marcus stepped away from the podium. The atrium was dead silent for a fraction of a second before erupting into a deafening roar of questions, applause, and shock. He didn't look back at the mayor. He didn't stop for the press. He walked down the steps, took Sarah's hand, and walked out into the crisp morning air. The storm had finally passed, but for Marcus Vance, the real fight had just begun. Marcus Vance's story is a chilling reminder of the realities faced by far too many, but it is also a powerful testament to what true leadership looks like. He didn't just inherit a broken system. He willingly stepped into the fire to expose its darkest corners, proving that change requires immense courage, uncompromising integrity, and the willingness to hold power accountable, It's a stark reminder that true justice starts from within. If this story of justice, resilience, and exposing the truth kept you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button. Make sure to share this video to spread Marcus's incredible message, and subscribe to our channel for more intense, real-life stories. What would you have done in the chief's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.